Whatever you're doing right now, stop.
What's going on, guys? Got my Slusho shirt on? That can only mean one thing. Time to talk about a new Cloverfield movie.
Go to your children right now. Kiss them. Hold them for as long as you can. That's all there is.
So before we get started, bit of background. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a huge Cloverfield fan. It has a very, very special place in my heart. This franchise has a history of secrecy. First film came out in 2008, debuted a trailer with no title. Super intriguing. Second film came out in 2016, debuted a trailer 1 month before its release. It wasn't a direct sequel to the first Cloverfield. It was rather a spec script called The Cellar that was retooled to be a Cloverfield tie-in. Then came the rumors of a third film, working title God Particle. Rumor had it that, like The Cellar, it was another retooled spec script. Originally it was supposed to come out in October. October came and went, no movie. Then it was supposed to come out this month, in February. January came, there was no trailer, everyone assumed that it was going to get pushed back, and sure enough, the announcement came that it was going to be pushed back to April 20th. Then, everyone assumed that we would be getting a trailer at the Super Bowl. Then came rumors that it was going to be a Netflix exclusive and not come out in theaters anymore. Theories were flying around left and right, no one knew it was true, and then the Super Bowl happened, and sure enough, there was a trailer. Trailer announcing that the film was going to be titled The Cloverfield Paradox. It would indeed be coming to Netflix as soon as the game ended. J.J. Abrams and Netflix conspired to release a film the night that the trailer aired. Netflix just made history, and now you're caught up. The Cloverfield Paradox, as it's now called, is directed by Julius Onah. It stars Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Elizabeth Debicki, Daniel Bruhl, David Oyelowo, Chris O'Dowd, and a bunch of other people, and it tells the story of a crew of scientists aboard a space station who are struggling to find a renewable energy source because the world below is running low on energy and there's wars erupting, and the search for said energy source on the space station causes all hell to break loose. I mean, look guys, like I said, the first Cloverfield is insanely special to me. It holds a really special place in my heart, and I was ecstatic to see a film that was advertised to be a direct tie-in to it. So I'm definitely not happy to say this movie let me down a bit. It's not bad, but it's definitely not great, and it's definitely not nearly as good as it could have been. And I would actually say it's definitely my least favorite of the Cloverfield multiverse. This film has weaknesses and strengths, both as a standalone film and as a Cloverfield film. As a standalone film, it's difficult to ignore the really glaring narrative and structural issues, and as a Cloverfield film, it suffers from the fact that it's desperately trying to tie into the other Cloverfield films and make them all make sense, and in doing so, convolutes itself even more. Especially when its tie-ins only come from the really obvious reshoots that feel completely separate of the rest of the film. I'll say this about the movie. It is fun. I did enjoy myself watching it. The things it does right, it does really well. It has an all-star cast, and they all do give excellent performances despite the fact that they don't have a lot to work with and they don't really particularly have a strong script. Gugu Mbatha-Raw is easily the standout here. The character of Hamilton, in addition to being the only developed character in the film, she has an overall distinct vulnerability and determination to her that really keeps you interested in everything she does whenever she's on screen, and you do really want to see her succeed. Arguably the best part of the movie, for me at least, was Bear McCreary's score. Returning from 10 Cloverfield Lane, he absolutely stepped it up in this movie. He brought his A-game. I thought that the score to this film was excellent. The title track alone is easily the most beautiful piece I've heard from him ever. Now's where the waters start to get a bit more muddied, though. Because while this next point is a positive for me, I can recognize that it also is reflective of the main problem with the Cloverfield brand overall. This movie is packed to the brim with fan service. There are references to the ARG everywhere. Tagruato, Bold Futura, Slusho, and then an old familiar face showing up toward the end of the film. And all of that, while it's everything I've ever wanted and more, it's indicative of a huge problem. This film shouldn't exist. Or at the very least, it shouldn't be called Cloverfield. With 10 Cloverfield Lane, like I said, the references were there, but they were tangential at best. This film is jam-packed with as many references to the ARG as you can pick up on, as well as the reappearance of a major character in the last scene, and yet it has absolutely zero connection to the first film story-wise at all, despite what it was advertised as. So even though I was having fun with all the references it was making, I couldn't help but feel they were rather empty. It's all nostalgia-based. It's pandering to the fan base by going, hey, remember Slusho? Here's a Slusho bobblehead. Here's the Slusho website theme song. despite the fact that none of it is really earned, nor does it have a place in the film. What's worse for me is that this movie is essentially JJ and company explaining away all of the mysteries of the Cloverfield franchise, both before and to come, by saying, oh, well, mankind meddled with the multiverse, so weird shit. Not only is that a really unsatisfying explanation for any film past this one, but it ruins the overall mystery box aspect of the Cloverfield films, which is arguably one of the best parts. It's like the magician showing you the secret compartment inside of his hat. You know how the trick works now, and you just want to go back to before you knew that. That's how the movie feels as a Cloverfield film. As a standalone film, it's a completely different story. For one, every character who isn't Hamilton is criminally underdeveloped. We know nothing about any of them, and as a result, their motivations are consistently unclear and confusing at times. It feels like several of the events in this film just happen, be it simply due to plot convenience or because the filmmakers thought that it would make for a cool image. I'll talk a little more about it in spoilers, but this film has no clear rules that it ever establishes. There's no clear rhyme or reason for anything, and it just feels like a lot of things occur because they needed some sort of dramatic sci-fi horror to happen. The film starts at an incredibly breakneck pace, skipping through all the parts where there should be character development, only to slow down at the part where things should be moving more quickly. The part when the film becomes ultimately a slasher film in space, with space-time as the killer. All of this while juggling a separate narrative that feels almost completely separate of the plot, the Cloverfield narrative. A narrative that, were it a separate Cloverfield short film, following up or connecting some way to the first film, would have been decent. Sort of like the Where Were You When Cloverfield Hit contest they did way back in the day. But instead, said Cloverfield short film is broken into pieces and stuck inside a derivative sci-fi horror film that feels a lot more like a modern-day retelling of Event Horizon. And as a result, it feels even more jarring when these two plots come together in the final 3 minutes, leading to a final fan service shot that, while enjoyable for the nostalgia, I enjoyed it in the moment, completely misses the mark for a number of reasons. In the end, I had much higher hopes for this movie. I did enjoy it. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't even all that bad, it was just really mediocre. It's definitely the weakest of the 3 Cloverfield films thus far, and if I had to give it an arbitrary number rating, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. But since I don't rate things that way, I'm gonna say that the Cloverfield paradox was just meh. I don't regret seeing it, but I think if this had been released in theaters like it was initially planned to, and I paid money to see it, I would have been a little pissed walking out. At its core, it feels like a decent Cloverfield short film wrapped inside a derivative sci-fi film. The acting's great. The production design is really nice, the score is amazing, but the film overall narratively is just really messy. I'm going to talk about some spoilers now, guys, so if you haven't seen the Cloverfield paradox and you plan to,
Stop.
So I discussed earlier the fact that things just happen and they're never explained, and there are so many questions this film leaves you with no clear answers. Some of them you can explain away by, oh, it's the idea of the whole dimensions merging. But it never establishes the rules of what could happen as a result of said dimensions merging, and so you're left with a million questions. Why does the Russian guy start talking to himself in the mirror? Was he talking to the worms? Why did the worms and the gyro teleport inside of him? I assume that the reason that objects were teleporting inside each other was because they were occupying the same space at the moment of merging. But are you telling me that the gyro and the worms were both in the same spot as the Russian guy when the 2 space stations merged together? Why did the wall eat Mundy's arm? Why did he not feel it? Why was the arm still moving around after the fact? How did Jensen know where the gun was when she was unconscious when they locked it up? Those are just a lot of the questions of things that are not explained. Now let's talk about the final shot of the movie. At the end of this film, we're greeted with the familiar face of the Cloverfield monster. Look, I'm not gonna lie, I was pleased to see him after 10 years. It was a nice reminder of one of my favorite movies, and it was cool to see a creature that I'm a fan of. But this final shot misses the mark for so many reasons, and there were so many better ways they could have done it. Imagine if they did it in a Godzilla 2014 style. You have a POV from inside the escape pod coming down through the clouds. They descend through the cloud layer, and instead of being greeted by, like, you know, a normal peaceful Earth, you see a city in ruin with an enormous silhouette of a monster roaring in the background. That would have been an awesome ending, and I would have been so satisfied with it. Instead, you get this really awkward comical shot where the Cloverfield monster, now able to breach the fucking stratosphere, bursts through the clouds and roars. Never mind the fact that this makes no sense for a ton of reasons. No one in Huntsville ground control decided to mention that there was a creature the size of Texas meandering around. It was literally in the stratosphere. You'd be able to see it from orbit, and their excuse for the sake of this twist ending, you get this really awkward throwaway line where the husband's like, you didn't tell them about these things, and the guy says, there's no time. There's no time to tell the scientists coming back to Earth there's a fucking creature the size of a state walking around? What is society like at this point? Never mind the fact that it's a scientific impossibility. No one felt the need to tell them this or warn them in any way, and that is just ridiculous. There were so many better ways to do that reveal if you wanted the ending of the film to be, oh, the Cloverfield monster is now in this universe. But they handle it in such an awkward way that just feels very fan servicey and not all that great. It doesn't work with the film. And I'm really disappointed they handled it in the way they did, despite the fact that it is there to appeal to my inner fan. At the end of the day, I just left feeling like this movie could have been so much better, and I'm a little disappointed, I'm not gonna lie. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. You can click down there and like and comment and subscribe, and I'll be back really soon. I wasn't expecting to do this review so soon, but I mean, hey, there's a new Cloverfield movie. It's not great, but it's a fun time, and if you're looking for some dumb sci-fi horror, check it out. Thank you, guys.
Right now.